Hi guys, in the last video I showed you how to set up a page, and so in this video I'm going to show you how we can start drawing some cool little shapes using the various shapes that are available in Adobe Illustrator. So with all the tools that are down here, just quickly, if you right click on any of the ones that have a little black arrow, there's a whole bunch of extra options underneath. So just have a look at, check some of those out. And if you want to click and hold, it does the same thing. So with all of our shapes, there's a few little tricks of the trade. So the first thing is every object that we draw, or most objects that we draw in Adobe Illustrator, have a fill and a stroke. So if I click and drag a shape, you can see I've got a brown fill and a purple stroke. The default for yours will be white, or white fill with a black stroke. So it might even look like you're not drawing anything if you draw it on here. That's why I'm half drawing off the side so you can see that contrast. Because if that was white, so let's double click over here, put up into white, you can see it looks like a white shape. If I just shrink it down, it looks like there's no fill, but there is a fill, it's just a white color. So if we take it off, then you can see that is in fact seeing a fill, and we're just seeing the edge of the page border shown through that shape. So the thickness of the stroke up here, I've bumped it up just to show you an example. The default is, I believe, 1. It's going to look quite thin. And so you can play with your stroke thickness over here. You can play with the stroke styling to look at different shapes. So if I just zoom in here, you can see there's a bit of a chamfer on the edge. We can have it is it inside or outside the border, or is it equidistant, are the curves, does it go to an end? So if you are drawing using a pen tool, what does that look like? So if we're playing around with the caps, you can see it's the end of that line, so you can actually play around with those as well. We'll get to the pen tool later on. So here's our shape. If we just put it all back to the default, there we are. So on the left, there's a couple of ways we can do stroke and fill. So over here we have color palette, or if we go stroke, we can do the same kind of thing. And there's your two options. Fill, same kind of thing. You can pick default ones or you pick from color palette. If you want a really big range of options, over on the left, if you double click on the fill, you actually have a full color palette. So you can change it, go through the spectrum, and then you can click and drag. And you can even manually type in the hex code for that particular color. Or if you remember or know what colors you'd like, you can type them in and it will change it. For example, FF and 4 zeros is RGB red, and I press enter. So here you can see the red fill is in front. If I click on the one behind, it brings it to the front, and we're now changing that. So generally I like to have no fill, and you might want to have no stroke potentially. So I like to have no stroke, and you might want to have no fill. So the little red line through a white box means none, and that gets rid of the outline. So I tell my students most of the time, don't use an outline to define the edge of a shape. Use two different shapes of color and their order to define those new shapes. Okay, so I can actually right click and I can send it to the back, and there we are. Whoop, excuse me. There we have our definition. Rather than having a big black border around every single shape that's there, we can actually use this contrast to define that edge, and that might be the horizon. Like imagine if we're doing a landscape and we've got green grass in the foreground, we've got nice light blue sky, and there's our horizon line to show our horizon, as you'd understand. So that's just a simple rectangle. Ellipse is a circle, just stretched out. With all of these tools, if you hold down Shift, it'll make the width and the height the same, so that makes it a perfect circle. And with a rectangle, it'll make it a perfect square and lock it in. With your polygon, same kind of thing, but I'm not actually holding Shift because you drag out from the center. But with your polygon and star, and if you have an old version, they actually combined it and called poly star, and in the latest version they have them as separate. With both of these tools, if you do a single click, you can actually define the number of sides in the case of polygon. So there's your 14-sided polygon. And in the case of the star, it's the number of points, as well as the internal and external radius. So we can bump up the number of points. Whoop, let's zoom out to see what we've done. There's our 9-pointed star. Now the internal radius, so if we just do a single click, radius 1 is the big one, which is the outside points, and radius 2 is the inside points. Imagine a circle going through this radius and a circle going through that one. That's what radius 1 and 2 are. And you can tell which is which because radius 1 is the bigger one, therefore it's the outside. So once you've just drawn some basic shapes, what we can actually do is we can draw some objects and start combining shapes. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how we can use the Pathfinder tools to create, subtract, and play around with shapes.